The morning fog rolled thick across Seattle's industrial district, where warehouses and wholesale markets lined the streets, in a patchwork of old brick and corrugated metal. Among the bustling figures preparing for another day at the Pike Place market, 16-year-old Ethan Blackwood arranged his fruit stand with practiced precision, his calloused hands moving swiftly in the early morning chill. The weathered wooden crates creaked under the weight of fresh apples and pears as he positioned them carefully, making sure the brightest and most appealing pieces caught the eye. This wasn't just about selling fruit, it was about survival. Each apple, each pear, each handful of berries represented another dollar toward his father's medication. "Looking good there, kid," called out Mr. Chen from the fish stand next door, his voice carrying over the general commotion of the market coming to life. "Those Washington apples are particularly fine today." Ethan managed a tired smile, adjusting his worn Seattle Seahawks cap. "Thanks, Mr. Chen. Dad always said presentation is half the sale." His voice caught slightly at the mention of his father, but he pushed the emotion down. There wasn't time for that now. The truth was, Nathan Blackwood hadn't been able to give much advice lately. The illness that had gripped him over the past year had reduced the once robust construction worker to a shadow of his former self, confined to their small apartment in the Rainier Valley neighborhood. The medical bills had piled up faster than the autumn leaves that now scattered across the market's cobblestone streets. As the morning progressed, Ethan fell into his usual rhythm. Fresh apples. Best in Seattle. Organic pears straight from local farms. His voice carried across the marketplace, competing with the cacophony of other vendors and the constant background noise of the city. Each sale brought a small measure of hope, another contribution to the ever-growing medical fund that seemed to drain as quickly as it filled. Between customers, his mind wandered to his former life, to Garfield High School, where he should have been starting his junior year, to his friends, who still sent him messages he rarely had time to answer, to the dream of college that seemed to drift further away with each passing day. But then another customer would approach, and Ethan would snap back to his practiced smile and sales pitch. The morning rush had just begun to slow when he noticed her, a girl about his age, dressed in clothes that probably cost more than his entire inventory, stood examining his fruit display with genuine interest. Her long dark hair was pulled back in an elegant braid, and despite the casual designer outfit, there was something almost regal about her bearing. "These apples look amazing," she said, picking up a particularly red specimen. "I don't think I've ever seen such perfect ones, even at Whole Foods." Ethan straightened up, professional instincts kicking in. "They're Honeycrisp apples, fresh from Eastern Washington. Best eating apples you'll find anywhere." She smiled, and something in her expression made him feel like they shared a secret, though they'd never met before. "I'm Sophia," she said, extending her hand in a surprisingly formal gesture. "I just moved here from Boston, and I'm trying to learn all the best local spots." "Ethan," he replied, shaking her hand briefly before turning to bag up some apples. "Well, you can't get more local than Pike Place Market. Been here since 1907. You know your history," Sophia observed, studying him with intelligent eyes that seemed to see more than just a market vendor. "I used to," Ethan began, but his voice trailed off as he spotted something behind Sophia that made his blood run cold. A delivery truck was backing up toward the market entrance, but its wheels were turned at an odd angle. The driver was looking the wrong way, hadn't noticed that the parking brake had failed on the slight incline. Time seemed to slow down. Ethan saw everything with crystal clarity, the truck beginning to roll, picking up speed. Sophia still examining the apples, completely unaware. The distance between them and safety, just a few feet, but it would require perfect timing. Without conscious thought, Ethan vaulted over his display, scattering apples across the cobblestones. His hand closed around Sophia's arm, and he pulled her forcefully toward him, spinning them both away from the truck's path. They stumbled together, falling against his stand, as the truck crashed into the empty space where Sophia had been standing moments before. The market erupted into chaos. People shouted, someone screamed, and the truck's horn blared continuously where the driver had fallen against it in the impact. But Ethan was focused only on making sure Sophia was unharmed. "Are you okay?" he asked, helping her to her feet. His heart was pounding so hard he could barely hear his own voice. Sophia stood shakily, her designer clothes now dusty and spotted with fruit juice, but otherwise unharmed. "You saved my life," she whispered, her eyes wide with the realization of what had just happened. Before Ethan could respond, a sleek black car screeched to a halt at the market entrance, and a tall man in an expensive suit leaped out, running toward them. "Sophia," he called out, his voice tight with panic. "Sophia, are you all right?" "I'm fine, Dad," she assured him, still gripping Ethan's arm. "Thanks to him. He pulled me out of the way just in time." The man turned to Ethan, his face a mixture of gratitude and residual fear. "Young man, I'm Harrison Ravenscroft. You just saved my daughter's life. I don't know how to thank you." Ethan shifted uncomfortably under the man's intense gaze. "Anyone would have done the same, sir." He glanced at his scattered produce, mental calculations already running through his head. The loss of inventory would hurt badly, but at least no one was injured. "Nonsense," Harrison declared, pulling out his phone. "I'm calling my assistant right now. We'll arrange for a proper reward. Whatever you want. College fund, new car, name it." The words college fund rang in Ethan's ears, tempting him with visions of returning to school, of pursuing his dreams. But then he thought of his father, lying in their small apartment, needing specialized medication that their insurance wouldn't cover. "Sir," Ethan said quietly, gathering his courage, "I appreciate the offer, but I don't want a reward." He took a deep breath. "However, if you really want to help, my father is sick. He needs treatment we can't afford. If you could help with that instead." Harrison Ravenscroft stared at the young man before him, something shifting in his expression. Behind him, Sophia watched with growing interest, still holding one of the perfect Honeycrisp apples that had started it all. The market slowly returned to its normal rhythm around them, but for these three people, something fundamental had changed. None of them knew it yet, but this moment, this choice, would set in motion events that would uncover long-buried secrets and forever alter the course of their lives. Harrison Ravenscroft's penthouse office in downtown Seattle offered a panoramic view of the city, from the Space Needle to the distant snow-capped peak of Mount Rainier. But his attention was focused entirely on the computer screen before him, where a simple background check had just unveiled something extraordinary. "Nathan Blackwood," he whispered, staring at the image on his screen. The resemblance was unmistakable, the same strong jawline, the same distinctive arch of the eyebrows that Harrison saw every morning in his own mirror. But how was it possible? His brother James had disappeared 30 years ago, following a bitter family dispute that had torn the Ravenscroft family apart. A soft knock at his door interrupted his thoughts. "Come in," he called out, quickly minimizing the window on his screen. Sophia entered, still wearing her market-stained clothes from earlier. "Dad? Have you made the arrangements for Ethan's father's treatment?" "Yes, sweetheart. I've already spoken with Dr. Matthews at Swedish Medical Center. They'll be expecting Mr. Blackwood tomorrow morning." Harrison drummed his fingers on his desk, his mind racing. "Sophia, tell me more about Ethan. What did you observe about him?" His daughter settled into one of the leather chairs facing his desk. "He's different from most people our age," she said thoughtfully. "There's a maturity about him. When he refused your money, it wasn't pride. You could see in his eyes he wanted it desperately, but he chose to help his father instead." Harrison nodded, remembering his own impression of the young man's quiet dignity. "What would you think about offering him a chance to return to school, perhaps at Lakeside?" Sophia's eyes lit up. "Your alma mater? That would be amazing, but..." Her expression grew serious. "Won't some of the students there give him a hard time? It's not exactly a welcoming environment for scholarship students." "Perhaps," Harrison acknowledged, "but something tells me Ethan Blackwood can handle whatever challenges come his way." He stood and walked to the window, gazing out at the city below. "Sometimes life gives us second chances we never expected, Sophia. Sometimes it gives us opportunities to right old wrongs." Meanwhile, across the city in their modest Rainier Valley apartment, Ethan sat beside his father's bed, relating the events of the day. Nathan Blackwood listened with increasing concern, his gaunt face showing signs of strain. "The Ravenscrofts?" Nathan's voice was barely above a whisper, but there was an edge to it that Ethan had never heard before. "Ethan, are you sure that was his name?" "Yes, Dad. Harrison Ravenscroft. He owns that big tech company, Ravenscroft Industries. He's sending a car tomorrow to take you to Swedish Medical Center. They have specialists there who..." "No." Nathan tried to sit up, setting off a bout of coughing. We can't accept their help. We'll find another way. Ethan felt a flash of frustration. Dad, please, this is the best hospital in Seattle. Mr. Ravenscroft said they have treatments that could help you. Why wouldn't we accept? Nathan sank back against his pillows, seeming to age years in moments. There are things you don't know, son. Things about our family. But before he could continue, another coughing fit seized him, and Ethan had to help him with his breathing exercises. By the time it passed, Nathan had exhausted what little energy he had, and soon drifted into an uneasy sleep. Ethan sat in the gathering darkness, watching his father's labored breathing. The small apartment felt even more cramped than usual, filled with unspoken words and mysteries he couldn't begin to understand. Outside, rain began to fall, creating a gentle percussion against the windows, a sound that had been the soundtrack to his entire life in Seattle. His phone buzzed with a text message. Unknown number. Hi Ethan, it's Sophia. Hope it's okay that I got your number from the market registration. Just wanted to check how you're doing after everything today. And to let you know that I talked to my dad about school. Ethan stared at the message for a long moment. Part of him wanted to ignore it, to maintain the walls he'd built around his life since his father fell ill. But something about Sophia's genuine concern, about the way she'd looked at him like a person rather than a charity case, made him hesitate. Finally, he typed back. Thanks for checking in. Dad's worried about accepting help from your family. Don't know why. Probably just pride. Sophia's response came quickly. Adults always think they have to protect us from the past, but sometimes the past needs to be faced. Want to meet for coffee tomorrow? I know a place with a great view of the Sound. Ethan glanced at his father, remembering his strange reaction to the Ravenscroft name. There were questions here, answers hovering just out of reach. And maybe Sophia, with her insider's access to the Ravenscroft world, could help him find them. Okay, he texted back, but it'll have to be early. I still have a fruit stand to run. As he set his phone aside, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that his life was about to change in ways he couldn't predict. The simple act of pulling Sophia out of harm's way had set something in motion, something bigger than himself. Like those perfect Honeycrisp apples that had caught her attention, it seemed that destiny sometimes came wrapped in the most ordinary packages. In his office high above the city, Harrison Ravenscroft was still staring at his computer screen, at the face of a man who might be his long-lost brother. And in his own bed across town, Nathan Blackwood tossed fitfully in his sleep, haunted by memories of a past he'd spent decades trying to forget. The early morning sun painted Seattle's waterfront in shades of gold and pearl gray as Ethan made his way to the coffee shop Sophia had suggested. Pike Place Market wouldn't open for another 2 hours, giving him a rare moment of freedom in his usually rigid schedule. The medical transport wouldn't pick up his father until 9, so he had time for this meeting, even if his conscience nagged at him for this small indulgence. Sophia was already waiting at a corner table in the locally owned cafe, 2 steaming mugs in front of her. The floor-to-ceiling windows offered a spectacular view of Elliott Bay, where ferries carved white paths through the morning mist. She wore casual clothes today, designer still but understated, and her hair was loose around her shoulders. I got you a latte, she said as he slid into the seat across from her. The barista said it's their specialty. Ethan wrapped his hands around the warm mug, suddenly aware of his work-roughened fingers against the delicate ceramic. Thanks. You didn't have to. About that, Sophia leaned forward, her expression serious. We need to talk about you not accepting things you think you don't deserve. He started to protest, but she held up a hand. My father told me about the school offer. Lakeside is an amazing opportunity, Ethan. Why are you hesitating? The latte was perfect, smooth and rich, but it tasted like guilt in his mouth. It's not that simple. My dad, when I mentioned your family name, he got really upset. I've never seen him like that before. Sophia's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. That's interesting because my father's been acting strange too. I found him in his study last night, going through old family photos I've never seen before. She pulled out her phone, swiped through a few images, then turned it toward Ethan. Look at this. The photograph was old, its colors faded to sepia tones. 2 young boys stood in front of what appeared to be a lake house, their arms around each other's shoulders, grinning at the camera. Even in the aged image, there was something familiar about their features. The one on the right is my dad, Sophia explained. He told me once that he had a brother, but they lost touch decades ago. Family drama, he said. He never talks about it. Ethan stared at the other boy in the photo, his heart beginning to race. The resemblance was undeniable. The same jaw, the same set of the eyes that he saw every time he looked at his father. "That's impossible," he whispered. "Is it?" Sophia took her phone back, studying the image. "My father's original family name wasn't Ravenscroft. He changed it when he started his company. It was Blackwood," Ethan finished, his voice hollow. "But that would mean that our fathers are brothers," Sophia said softly, "which would make us cousins." The revelation hung between them like a physical presence as servers bustled around their table and the morning crowd began to filter in. Outside, a seabird wheeled past the window, its cry muted by the thick glass. Why wouldn't he tell me? Ethan wondered aloud, thinking of all the times he'd asked about his family history. His father had always been vague, saying only that they didn't have any living relatives. "The same reason my dad changed his name, probably," Sophia suggested. "Whatever happened back then, it must have been serious. But Ethan, don't you see? This is why you have to accept the offer to come to Lakeside. It's not charity, it's family." Ethan ran a hand through his hair, his mind racing. "Even if that's true, I can't just abandon the fruit stand. We still need the income, even with the medical bills covered." "Actually," Sophia smiled, "I might have a solution for that too. My father's company has a charitable foundation that supports small businesses. They could provide a grant to hire someone to run the stand while you're in school." "Your father sure moves fast," Ethan observed, a hint of his usual dry humor returning. "He's efficient," Sophia agreed. "It's kind of his thing, but Ethan, I think there's more going on here than just efficiency. I think he's trying to fix something that broke a long time ago." The morning light had strengthened, burning away the last wisps of fog from the bay. Ethan checked his phone, still an hour before he needed to be at the market. "Tell me about Lakeside," he said finally. "What am I getting myself into?" Sophia's face lit up, and she launched into a description of the school's campus, its programs, and its traditions. As she talked, Ethan found himself drawn into her enthusiasm, allowing himself to imagine a different future than the one he'd resigned himself to. But questions still nagged at him. Why had his father kept this secret for so long? What had happened to drive two brothers so far apart? And most importantly, was he ready for the changes that accepting this connection would bring to his life? As if reading his thoughts, Sophia reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "You know what the best thing about family is?" she asked. "Even when they mess up, even when they keep secrets or make mistakes, there's always a chance to make things right. Always." Ethan looked out at the bay, where the ferries continued their endless journeys back and forth across the water. Like those vessels, he realized, he was at a crossing point. He could stay on his current shore, maintaining the life he knew, or he could venture across to something new and unknown. The decision crystallized in his mind just as his phone buzzed with a text message. It was from the medical transport service, confirming they were on their way to pick up his father. "I need to get back," he said, standing. "Dad's heading to the hospital this morning." Sophia stood as well, gathering her things. "Want some company? I mean, we are family, apparently." The word family still felt strange, like a new shoe that hadn't been broken in yet. But as they walked together through the awakening city, Ethan found himself growing more comfortable with the idea. Perhaps Sophia was right. Perhaps there was always a chance to make things right, to rebuild what had been broken. What he didn't know, what neither of them knew, was that their father's past held more secrets than either of them imagined, and some of those secrets were about to come to light in ways that would test their newfound family bonds to their very limits. The halls of Swedish Medical Center were a maze of pristine white and muted blue, their sterile efficiency a stark contrast to the cozy chaos of Pike Place Market. Ethan and Sophia found Nathan's room easily enough. It was one of the premium suites on the top floor, with a view of the Seattle skyline that rivaled Harrison Ravenscroft's office. Nathan was already settled in, looking small and fragile against the crisp hospital linens. But there was a tension in his face that Ethan hadn't seen before, an alertness that seemed to have nothing to do with the medical equipment surrounding him. "Dad," Ethan said softly, "you have a visitor." He gestured to Sophia, who hung back uncertainly in the doorway. Nathan's eyes widened as he took in Sophia's appearance. "You look just like your grandmother," he whispered, then immediately pressed his lips together, as if trying to take back the words. Sophia stepped forward, her usual confidence tempered by the emotional weight of the moment. "So you do recognize the family resemblance," she said. "We found an old photograph." "Ethan," Nathan interrupted, his voice strained. "Could you please get me some water?" It was a transparent attempt to get his son out of the room, but Ethan complied, sharing a quick glance with Sophia before stepping out. As soon as he was gone, Nathan's expression hardened. "Whatever Harrison's told you," he began, but Sophia cut him off. "He hasn't told me anything, that's the problem. Both of you have been keeping secrets, and it's not fair to Ethan or me. We're not children anymore." Nathan closed his eyes, his fingers plucking restlessly at the blanket. "Some secrets protect people." "Do they?" Sophia challenged. "Because from where I'm standing, these secrets have only hurt people. They kept cousins from knowing each other. They kept brothers apart." In the hallway, Ethan lingered near the water dispenser, fighting the urge to return too quickly. A movement caught his eye. Harrison Ravenscroft was approaching, his confident stride faltering slightly as he noticed Ethan. "I suppose we need to talk," Harrison said, his voice low enough not to carry into the room. Ethan nodded toward the small waiting area nearby, and they settled into the uncomfortable plastic chairs. For a moment, neither spoke, the beeping of medical equipment and distant announcements filling the silence. "Your father," Harrison finally began. "He was born James Blackwood. He's my younger brother." "I figured that out," Ethan said. "What I don't understand is why he changed his name, why he never told me I had family." Harrison's perfectly maintained facade cracked slightly, showing a glimpse of old pain beneath. "Our father was a difficult man, controlling. He had very specific ideas about how the family fortune should be managed, about how we should live our lives. I rebelled by going into technology instead of banking. James rebelled by walking away entirely. But why change his name? To make a clean break, to ensure our father couldn't find him." Harrison ran a hand through his silver-streaked hair. "I respected his choice, even though it hurt. I thought he was happier living his own life." "He was," Ethan said firmly. "He is. Even now, even sick, he's never regretted his choices." Back in the hospital room, a similar conversation was unfolding. "You don't understand what it was like," Nathan was telling Sophia. "The pressure, the expectations. Harrison thrived on it, but I couldn't breathe. And then when I met Rachel, Ethan's mother." Sophia leaned forward, eager for any information about her aunt. She was a waitress at a diner near the university. Beautiful, kind, and completely unimpressed by the Blackwood name or money. "My father," Nathan's voice caught. "He said if I married her, I'd be cut off. No trust fund, no inheritance, no family connections. I chose Rachel. But why cut off contact with Uncle Harrison too?" Nathan's laugh was bitter. "Because he sided with our father. Or so I thought at the time. I was young, angry, sure that I was right and everyone else was wrong. By the time I realized my mistake, too much time had passed. Too many bridges had been burned." In the waiting area, Harrison was showing Ethan something on his phone, old family photos, preserved despite the decades of separation. "I've been looking for him," Harrison admitted, "off and on over the years. But he'd changed his name, moved around. It wasn't until you saved Sophia that the pieces finally came together." "And now?" Ethan asked. "What happens now?" Before Harrison could answer, they heard raised voices from Nathan's room. They hurried back to find Nathan trying to get out of bed, his face flushed with emotion, while Sophia attempted to calm him. "James," Harrison said from the doorway using his brother's original name. "Please, you'll hurt yourself." Nathan froze at the sound of his brother's voice. The brothers stared at each other across the hospital room, 30 years of silence stretching between them like a chasm. "I didn't side with him," Harrison said quietly. "I was trying to buy you time, to convince him to accept your choice. But you disappeared before I could explain." "I couldn't risk him finding us," Nathan replied. "Rachel was pregnant with Ethan. I had to protect my family. We were your family too." Harrison's voice cracked slightly. "We still are." Ethan and Sophia exchanged glances, both feeling like witnesses to a moment that had been decades in the making. The monitors beeped steadily, marking time as the brothers grappled with their shared past. Finally, Nathan's shoulders slumped. "I should have trusted you," he admitted. "But I was so sure I knew what was right. We both made mistakes. Harrison moved closer to the bed. But maybe it's not too late to fix them. As the brothers began to talk in earnest, Ethan felt Sophia's hand slip into his. They stepped out into the hallway together, giving their fathers space to begin rebuilding what had been broken so long ago. "Well, cousin," Sophia said with a small smile, "I'd say this morning has been pretty eventful." Ethan leaned against the wall, feeling the weight of revelations pressing down on him. "I still have so many questions. About my mum, about what happened after they left. We'll figure it out together," Sophia promised. "That's what family does, right? Family." The word was beginning to feel more real, more solid. But as Ethan watched his father and uncle through the doorway, he couldn't shake the feeling that they still hadn't uncovered all the secrets hidden in their shared past. Some revelations, he suspected, were still waiting to come to light. The Lakeside School campus sprawled across several manicured acres in North Seattle, its brick buildings and towering evergreens creating an atmosphere more reminiscent of an elite college than a high school. Ethan stood at the entrance, his new backpack feeling foreign on his shoulders, watching students stream past in their casual but clearly expensive clothing. 2 weeks had passed since the revelations at the hospital. His father was responding well to the new treatments, and Harrison had arranged everything for Ethan's transfer to Lakeside with remarkable efficiency. The fruit stand was now being managed by Mr. Chen's nephew, who had recently graduated from business school and saw it as a perfect opportunity to gain practical experience. Ready for this? Sophia appeared beside him, wearing the confident smile he'd come to recognize as her armor against the world. "I've already told everyone you're my cousin, so you don't have to worry about people thinking this is some charity case, because being the long-lost cousin who suddenly appeared is so much better," Ethan replied dryly, but he was grateful for her presence. As they walked through the campus, Sophia pointed out various buildings and gave him a running commentary on the social dynamics of Lakeside's elite student body. "Most people here are actually pretty cool," she explained. "They're used to having classmates from all backgrounds. The scholarship program is pretty extensive. Just watch out for Trevor Walsh. He thinks his father's hedge fund makes him nobility or something." Their first class was advanced literature, held in a wood-paneled room that smelled of old books and privilege. Ethan found a seat near the middle of the room, trying to blend in despite feeling like every eye was on him. The teacher, Ms. Winters, was discussing Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice with an enthusiasm that made even the most reluctant students sit up and pay attention. "Now, who can tell me about the theme of social class in the novel?" Ms. Winters asked, her eyes scanning the room. "Ah, Mr. Blackwood, our new student. Would you care to share your thoughts?" Ethan felt his face warm as the class turned to look at him, but years of dealing with market customers had taught him how to maintain his composure. "Well," he began, drawing on his memory of reading the book during lunch breaks at the market, "it's interesting how Austen shows that true worth isn't about money or status, like how Mr. Darcy has to learn to see past Elizabeth's lower social position, and she has to see past her prejudice about his wealth." A few students nodded appreciatively, and Ms. Winters smiled. "Excellent observation, Mr. Blackwood. Perhaps you can relate this to modern society." Before Ethan could respond, a voice cut in from the back of the room. "Oh, I'm sure he can," Trevor Walsh drawled, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "Being our resident expert on social climbing." "Mr. Walsh," Ms. Winters' voice turned sharp, but Sophia was already on her feet. "Funny you should mention climbing, Trevor," she said sweetly. "Wasn't your grandfather a janitor before he got lucky in the stock market? At least my cousin comes from old money, even if his father chose to walk away from it." The class erupted in poorly concealed snickers, and Trevor's face turned an interesting shade of red. Ms. Winters called for order, but Ethan caught Sophia's eye and mouthed a silent "thank you." As the day progressed, Ethan found himself gradually relaxing into the routine of classes. The curriculum was challenging, but he'd always been a good student, and his years of practical experience in the market had taught him more about math and business than he'd realized. During lunch, Sophia introduced him to her friend group, a diverse mix of students who seemed more interested in his experience running a market stall than in his family connections. As they sat in the cafeteria, with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Washington, Ethan felt a strange mix of belonging and disconnection. "Hey," one of Sophia's friends, a girl named Maya, nudged him. "Is it true you're from Portland originally?" My mom grew up there. Ethan blinked in surprise. Actually, I'm not sure. Dad never talks about where we lived before Seattle. I know my mom was from Portland, but she's not around anymore. A sudden hush fell over the table, but Maya's expression showed genuine interest rather than pity. Really? Which part of Portland? My mom knows practically everyone there. I don't know, Ethan admitted. Dad doesn't talk about her much, just that her name was Rachel and she worked at a diner near some university. Maya pulled out her phone. That helps narrow it down. There aren't that many diners near Portland State that have been around that long. Want me to ask my mum? Ethan hesitated. His father's recent openness about the past seemed limited to the Blackwood family history. Whenever Rachel was mentioned, he still closed up, his eyes taking on that distant look that meant the conversation was over. But sitting here surrounded by his new peers, Ethan felt a surge of determination. He had a right to know about his mother, didn't he? And if his father wouldn't tell him, "Yeah," he said finally. "I'd like that." "Thanks." The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of advanced calculus and AP chemistry. By the time the final bell rang, Ethan's head was spinning with new information, but he felt more energized than exhausted. Sophia caught up with him as he was organizing his new textbooks at his locker. Uncle Harrison is picking us up. He wants to take us somewhere. "I should check on Dad," Ethan protested, but Sophia shook her head. Already cleared it with him. "Come on, cousin, trust me on this one." They found Harrison waiting in his Tesla Model S, looking unusually contemplative. As they pulled away from the school, he didn't head toward either the hospital or his downtown office. Instead, they drove north, following the winding roads that led to the wealthy enclaves along the Sound. "Where are we going?" Ethan asked, watching the mansions grow larger and more secluded. "To see something that belongs to you," Harrison replied cryptically. "Something that should have been yours all along." They turned onto a private drive that curved through towering cedar trees before opening onto a view that made Ethan catch his breath. There, perched on a bluff overlooking Puget Sound, stood an elegant craftsman-style house with wide porches and walls of windows, reflecting the afternoon light. "The lake house," Sophia whispered, recognizing it from the old photograph. "Your grandfather's summer home," Harrison confirmed, parking in front of the house. "And now, thanks to some creative legal work, it belongs to both of you, jointly, as it should have from the beginning." Ethan stared at the house, remembering the photo of two young brothers standing before it, their whole lives still ahead of them. Somewhere in there, he sensed, were more pieces to the puzzle of his family's past. More clues about his mother, about the choices that had shaped his life before he was even born. As if reading his thoughts, Harrison pulled an old key from his pocket. Ready to do some exploring? The lake house smelled of cedar and memories, its rooms preserved like artifacts in a museum of family history. Dust motes danced in the shafts of afternoon light that streamed through the windows, and their footsteps echoed on the hardwood floors as Harrison led them through the main level. "Nobody's lived here since Father passed," Harrison explained, his voice softening with nostalgia. "I couldn't bring myself to sell it, but I couldn't stay here either. Too many memories." Ethan ran his hand along a mahogany banister, trying to imagine his father as a young man in this house. Had he been happy here before everything fell apart? Had he walked these same halls, touched this same wood, dreamed his own dreams of the future? "The kitchen's through there," Harrison pointed, "and upstairs are the bedrooms. Your father's old room is still exactly as he left it." Sophia was already halfway up the stairs, her natural curiosity overtaking any sense of hesitation. Ethan followed more slowly, taking in the family photos that lined the stairwell. Many featured the two brothers at various ages, but there were older images too. Stern-faced men and elegantly dressed women who shared the same strong Blackwood features. "Second door on the right," Harrison called up after them. "I need to make a few calls, but take your time exploring." The door to Nathan's old room creaked slightly as Ethan pushed it open. Inside, it was like stepping into a time capsule. Posters of 80s bands covered one wall, while another held shelves lined with books and old trophies. A desk stood beneath the window, its surface still cluttered with notebooks and papers yellowed with age. "Ethan," Sophia called softly from where she was examining the desk. "Look at this." She held up a leather-bound journal, its pages thick with what looked like photographs and newspaper clippings. Ethan took it carefully, settling onto the old twin bed as Sophia sat beside him. The first few pages contained typical teenage memorabilia: concert tickets, report cards, photographs of young Nathan with friends. But deeper in the journal, they found something more significant: a series of letters, carefully preserved between the pages. "They're from my mum," Ethan realized, recognizing the name Rachel signed at the bottom of each one. His hands trembled slightly as he began to read. "Dearest James, meeting you has turned my world upside down in the best possible way. I don't care what your father says. Love like this is worth more than any trust fund. I can't believe you're willing to give up everything for me. But are you sure, really sure? I couldn't bear it if you came to regret this decision. The baby's kicking so much today. I think he knows his daddy's voice already. I can't wait for you to feel it." Each letter revealed more about the woman who had given him life, painting a picture of someone vibrant and loving who had faced the disapproval of the Blackwood family with courage and grace. But it was the final letter that made Ethan's breath catch. "My darling, I'm worried about your father's investigators. They've been asking questions at the diner, and yesterday I saw someone following me home. I know you said we should stand our ground, but I'm scared. Not for myself, but for our baby. Maybe your brother's offer to help us disappear isn't such a bad idea after all." "Harrison was trying to help them," Sophia whispered. "All this time, Dad thought Uncle Nathan had rejected his help, but something went wrong," Ethan finished. "Something that made them run before the plan could work." They heard footsteps on the stairs and quickly returned the journal to the desk. Harrison appeared in the doorway, his expression unreadable as he surveyed the room. "Finding anything interesting?" he asked. Ethan met his uncle's gaze steadily. "Why didn't you tell us you tried to help them escape?" Harrison's shoulders sagged slightly. "Because it was my greatest failure. I had everything arranged: new identities, a place to stay in Canada, enough money to start over. But before I could tell James the details, he and Rachel vanished. So I searched for years, but they'd gone completely off the grid. By the time I finally tracked them down, my mum was gone," Ethan said quietly. "Yes." Harrison moved to the window, looking out at the sound. "I found out she had passed when Ethan was just a baby. By then, James, Nathan, had built a new life. He seemed, if not happy, at least at peace. I convinced myself it would be cruel to disrupt that." Sophia stood suddenly. "There's more, isn't there? Something you're not telling us?" Harrison turned back to them, his expression troubled. "Your mother's family in Portland. They've been looking for you, Ethan. They never knew what happened to Rachel, only that she'd disappeared with her wealthy boyfriend. They've spent years trying to find out the truth. I have grandparents?" Ethan's voice cracked slightly. "Other family?" "Yes, and they would very much like to meet you." Harrison pulled out his phone. "I've been in contact with them since I confirmed Nathan was my brother. They're willing to come to Seattle if you want to see them." Ethan's mind raced. More family, more connections he'd never known existed, but something still bothered him about the story. "Why did they run?" he asked. "Really? Those letters? Mom mentioned investigators being followed. What was really happening?" Harrison's expression darkened. "Our father, he wasn't just trying to stop the marriage. He'd uncovered something about Rachel's past, something he thought made her dangerous to the family. I never knew what it was. He took that secret with him when he passed. But whatever it was, it scared your parents enough to make them run before I could help them." The room fell silent except for the distant sound of waves against the bluff. The afternoon light had shifted, casting long shadows across the floor, making the familiar room feel suddenly mysterious and full of secrets. "I want to meet them," Ethan said finally. "My mother's family. I want to know the truth about what happened back then." Harrison nodded slowly. "I'll make the arrangements." "But Ethan, are you sure you're ready for whatever we might discover?" "I've spent my whole life not knowing," Ethan replied. "I think that's worse than any truth could be." Sophia squeezed his hand supportively, but her expression was troubled. They had uncovered one layer of family secrets, but it was becoming clear that deeper mysteries still remained. Mysteries that could either heal their newly reunited family or tear it apart all over again. The private waiting room at SeaTac Airport buzzed with nervous energy. Ethan paced back and forth while Sophia attempted to distract him with stories about their classmates at Lakeside. Harrison stood by the window, periodically checking his phone, while Nathan sat in a wheelchair nearby. his face a mask of anxiety. The past week had been a whirlwind of preparation. Nathan's health had improved enough for short outings, and he'd insisted on being present for this meeting, despite his doctor's reservations. Now they were waiting for the arrival of Rachel's parents, flying in from Portland on Harrison's private jet. "They're landing," Harrison announced, reading a message on his phone. "About 15 minutes until they clear security." Ethan stopped pacing and sank into a chair beside his father. "Are you sure you're up for this, Dad?" Nathan reached out and squeezed his son's hand. "I owe it to your mother. And to you. I've kept too many secrets for too long." The door opened and an airport staff member stepped in. "Mr. Ravenscroft, your guests have arrived." Ethan stood as an elderly couple entered the room. The woman was small and elegant, with silver hair and Rachel's warm brown eyes. The man was tall and distinguished, wearing a Portland Trail Blazers pin on his lapel. They both froze when they saw Ethan, their eyes filling with tears. "Oh my God," the woman whispered. "You look just like her." "Mrs. and Mr. Bennett." Harrison stepped forward smoothly. "Welcome to Seattle. This is Ethan, and of course you remember Nathan." Eleanor Bennett barely seemed to hear him, moving forward with trembling steps to cup Ethan's face in her hands. "We've waited so long," she said softly. "So many years of wondering." "Mom," Nathan's voice was rough with emotion. "Dad, I'm so sorry." Robert Bennett turned to his son-in-law, his expression complex. "We thought you were dead too. When Rachel stopped calling, when all our letters came back, we hired private investigators, but it was like you'd vanished into thin air." "We had to," Nathan replied. "Father Blackwood, he was going to—" "Perhaps we should all sit down," Harrison interrupted gently. "There's a lot to discuss, and this isn't the place." They relocated to Harrison's lakeside house, where the staff had prepared lunch on the terrace overlooking the water. As they settled around the table, Eleanor pulled a photo album from her bag. "We thought you might want to see these," she said to Ethan. "Pictures of your mother growing up." The album was a treasure trove of memories. Rachel as a toddler, chasing butterflies in a Portland garden. Rachel in middle school, proudly holding up a science fair trophy. Rachel in high school, performing in a production of Our Town. She loved the theater, Eleanor explained, watching Ethan drink in each image. "She was studying drama at Portland State when she met your father. She was the most talented person in the program," Nathan added softly. "She lit up the stage every time she performed." Robert Bennett cleared his throat. "Which makes it all the more strange that she would suddenly abandon her dreams. Nathan, we need to know the truth. What really happened back then?" The tension around the table increased noticeably. Harrison set down his coffee cup with a sharp click. "Perhaps this isn't the best time." "No," Nathan interrupted. "They deserve to know. Ethan deserves to know." He took a deep breath. Rachel wasn't just studying drama. She was also working on an investigative piece for the university newspaper. Something about corporate corruption. She never told me the details, but she was excited about it. Said it could be her ticket to a journalism career. Eleanor's hand flew to her mouth. "The week before she disappeared, she called me. Said she'd discovered something big, something that could change everything. But she wouldn't tell me what it was over the phone. Father found out somehow," Nathan continued. "He showed me documents. Claimed Rachel was actually an undercover journalist trying to expose the Blackwood family's business practices. Said she was using me to get inside information." "That's ridiculous," Robert exploded. "Rachel would never—" "I know that now," Nathan said quickly. "But at the time, Father was very convincing. He had photos of her meeting with other journalists, transcripts of phone calls. When I confronted her, Rachel admitted she was working on a story, but said it had nothing to do with our family. Said she'd stumbled onto something much bigger. The next day," he continued, his voice dropping, "someone broke into her apartment. All her research was stolen. That's when we knew it wasn't just about the story anymore. Someone was willing to go to extreme lengths to keep whatever she'd discovered hidden." Sophia, who had been quietly observing, suddenly spoke up. "But what happened to her research? Surely there must have been backups, notes, something—" "There was a safety deposit box," Nathan said. "In Portland. Rachel said she'd put copies of everything there, but we never had a chance to get to it. We had to run that night, with just the clothes on our backs." Eleanor's eyes widened. "The box. Rachel asked me to hold on to the key. I still have it all these years later. I could never bring myself to throw away anything of hers. We need to see what's in that box, Ethan said firmly. Whatever Mum discovered, whatever made you both run, the truth is still out there. Harrison leaned forward. I can have the jet ready in an hour. We can be in Portland by dinner time. Nathan's not strong enough for another trip, Sophia protested, but Nathan shook his head. This involves all of us now. I'm going. I need to know what Rachel found and what really happened back then. As the adults began making arrangements, Ethan stepped away from the table, moving to the terrace railing. The water below sparkled in the afternoon sun, peaceful and unchanging despite the turbulent revelations happening above. Sophia joined him, bumping his shoulder gently with hers. You okay? I don't know, he admitted. All my life I thought Mum was just gone. Now I find out she was investigating something important enough to make people want to hurt her. Important enough to make my parents run away from everything they knew. We'll figure it out, Sophia promised. Whatever's in that safety deposit box, whatever secrets are still hidden, we'll face them together. That's what family does, right? Ethan nodded, but his mind was already racing ahead to Portland, to the mysterious box that might finally reveal the truth about his mother's past. Behind him, he could hear his father and grandparents sharing more memories of Rachel, their voices a mixture of laughter and tears. Whatever they discovered in Portland would change everything, again. But this time, at least, he wasn't facing it alone. The Portland skyline emerged from the clouds as Harrison's private jet began its descent. Ethan pressed his face against the window, taking in the city where his mother had grown up, where she'd fallen in love with his father, where she'd uncovered whatever secret had changed their lives forever. They'd decided to keep the group small for this trip, just Ethan, Nathan, against medical advice, Harrison, Sophia, and Eleanor Bennett, who had the key to the safety deposit box. Robert had stayed behind in Seattle, working with Harrison's security team to digitize and analyze the old photos and letters they'd found. The bank's already been notified we're coming, Harrison said as they deplaned. They'll stay open late for us. Eleanor directed their driver through the streets of downtown Portland, pointing out landmarks from Rachel's life along the way. That's the theater, where she had her first leading role, and there's the diner where she worked, though it's a coffee shop now. Nathan was unusually quiet, his face pale as he took in the familiar surroundings. Ethan wondered how many memories these streets held for him, both good and bad. The bank was an imposing old building in the heart of downtown. The manager was waiting for them, clearly aware of the Ravenscroft name's significance. They were led to a private room where the safety deposit box had been brought up from the vault. Eleanor's hands shook slightly as she inserted the key. Rachel made me promise to keep this safe, said it was her insurance policy. I never knew what she meant. The box opened with a soft click. Inside was a manila envelope, sealed and labeled with Rachel's elegant handwriting, the truth about Morrison Chemical and its legacy. Harrison's sharp intake of breath made everyone look up. Morrison Chemical? Are you sure? You know something about this? Ethan asked, but Harrison was already pulling out his phone, typing rapidly. Morrison Chemical was one of Father's biggest acquisitions, he explained, but the deal happened right around the time James and Rachel disappeared. I never made the connection before. Eleanor carefully opened the envelope. Inside were photographs, documents, and a handwritten letter addressed to whoever finds this. Dear reader, Eleanor began reading, her voice trembling. If you're reading this, something has happened to me. What I've uncovered about Morrison Chemical and its practices is too important to stay hidden. The letter detailed Rachel's investigation into Morrison Chemical's waste disposal practices in the 1980s. She'd discovered evidence that the company had been dumping toxic chemicals into remote waterways throughout the Pacific Northwest, leading to clusters of serious illnesses in nearby communities. The company's executives knew, Eleanor read. They had reports showing the dangers, but they buried them. When workers or community members got sick, they were paid off or threatened into silence. But I found the proof. Internal memos, medical reports, everything needed to expose the truth. Nathan's face had gone even paler. Father knew. That's why he was so desperate to stop us. Morrison Chemical was his biggest deal ever, worth billions. But Rachel's evidence would have destroyed everything. The Blackwood family fortune, Harrison realized. A significant portion of it came from that acquisition. If this had come out... But why didn't Mum publish what she knew, Ethan asked. Why run instead of exposing the truth? Keep reading, Mom, Sophia urged quietly. Eleanor wiped tears from her eyes and continued, but it's not just about Morrison Chemical anymore. I've discovered connections to other companies, other cover-ups. This goes deeper than I ever imagined, and now they know I know. Last night, someone broke into my apartment. They're watching me. If you're reading this, remember, the truth isn't just in these documents. Check the hospital records in Cascade Falls. Look for Dr. Sarah Chen's research. She knew too, but they silenced her. Cascade Falls? Sophia interrupted. That's less than 2 hours from Seattle, and Chen, isn't that the same name as Mr. Chen from the market? Ethan finished. My neighbor at the fruit stand. He's been looking out for me all these years. Did he know? Was he connected to all this somehow? Harrison was already on his phone again. Dr. Sarah Chen, yes, here it is. She was an epidemiologist who studied unusual disease patterns in the Pacific Northwest. She retired suddenly in 1989, moved to Seattle. Mr. Chen is her brother. He promised Rachel he'd keep an eye on you, Nathan said softly. After everything, he was one of the few people who knew where we were, who helped us stay hidden. Ethan sat back, his mind reeling. All these years, selling fruit next to Mr. Chen, never knowing the connection, never suspecting that the quiet man with the ready smile was part of his mother's story. We need to talk to him, Sophia declared. And we need to go to Cascade Falls. Mom's research, Dr. Chen's data, it could still be there. It's not that simple, Harrison warned. These companies, these people, they're still powerful. If they realize we're looking into this again, I don't care, Ethan said firmly. Mom risked everything to uncover the truth. She spent her life protecting me, protecting all of us. We owe it to her to finish what she started. Eleanor reached across the table and took his hand. Rachel would be so proud of you. She always said that the truth was worth any price. Nathan straightened in his wheelchair, some of his old strength returning to his voice. Harrison, we're going to need your help. Your resources, your connections, we can't do this alone. Of course, Harrison replied without hesitation. Whatever it takes, we're family. As they carefully repacked the safety deposit box, planning their next moves, Ethan felt a strange mix of emotions. Grief for the mother he'd never really known, pride in her courage, determination to uncover the full truth she'd died protecting, but also hope, because he wasn't alone anymore. He had family, not just his father and uncle, but grandparents, a cousin, and even a quiet fruit vendor who'd kept his promise to a brave young journalist all these years. Outside the bank, Portland's evening traffic flowed past, oblivious to the discoveries that had just upended multiple lives. Tomorrow they would return to Seattle, begin the delicate process of investigating decades-old secrets. But for now, Ethan stood with his newfound family, holding pieces of his mother's legacy, finally beginning to understand the true meaning of inheritance. The Pike Place market was just opening as Ethan approached Mr. Chen's fish stand. The familiar sounds and smells brought back memories of countless mornings spent arranging fruit displays, but everything felt different now. Every familiar face could be hiding secrets. Every casual greeting could carry hidden meaning. Mr. Chen was arranging his morning display when he saw Ethan. The older man's usually cheerful expression faltered slightly, as if he could read the questions in Ethan's eyes. You know why I'm here, Ethan said quietly. Mr. Chen nodded, glancing around the mostly empty market. Not here. Come to my sister's house this afternoon. Bring your family, all of them. It's time you knew everything. The address Mr. Chen provided led them to a modest craftsman house in the Ballard neighborhood. Dr. Sarah Chen opened the door before they could knock, her silver hair pulled back in a neat bun, her sharp eyes taking in the group assembled on her porch. James Blackwood, she said, looking at Nathan. You look exactly like your father did at your age. Please, all of you, come in. The living room was filled with books and scientific journals, many featuring Dr. Chen's name on the spines. She served tea in delicate cups, while Mr. Chen brought out a battered cardboard box from a hall closet. I've kept everything, he said, setting the box on the coffee table. All of Rachel's research, all of my sister's data. We knew someday you would come looking for answers. Why didn't you tell me? Ethan asked. All those years at the market. Rachel made us promise, Dr. Chen explained. She said the less you knew, the safer you would be. But she also made us promise to keep the evidence safe, in case something happened to her. Harrison leaned forward. What exactly did Rachel discover about Morrison Chemical? Dr. Chen's expression hardened. It wasn't just about illegal dumping, though that was bad enough. They were developing new chemical compounds, untested and unauthorized. The waste from these experiments contaminated water sources throughout the region. She spread photographs across the table, satellite images showing dark patches in remote waterways, medical records with personal information redacted, graphs showing unusual disease clusters. I was tracking unusual health patterns in several communities, she continued. The correlation was clear, but every time I tried to publish my findings, they were blocked. Funding would suddenly disappear. Data would go missing. Pressure would be applied to university administrators. Then Rachel found the connection to Morrison, Mr. Chen added. She discovered internal documents proving they knew about the effects of their experiments. But she also found something else, evidence that some of the compounds were being developed for military applications. Nathan's hand trembled as he picked up one of the photographs. That's why Father was so desperate to stop her. It wasn't just about the Morrison acquisition. It was about keeping these military contracts secret. Exactly, Dr. Chen confirmed. Once Rachel understood the full scope of what she'd uncovered, she knew publishing wasn't an option. They would have buried the story and anyone connected to it. Sophia, who had been examining the documents, suddenly held up a map. These marks, they show contamination sites. One of them is right near Cascade Falls. The worst of them, Dr. Chen nodded. We found evidence of genetic mutations in local wildlife, unusual illness patterns in the community. But every time we tried to investigate, we were blocked. The whole area was suddenly declared private property, fenced off for wildlife conservation. It's still there, Harrison said, checking his tablet. The Cascade Falls Nature Preserve, owned by a subsidiary of, well, technically of Ravenscroft Industries. Father must have acquired it during the Morrison deal. Eleanor Bennett, who had been quietly absorbing everything, spoke up. My daughter, did they... She couldn't finish the question. Dr. Chen reached across and took her hand. Rachel became ill very suddenly. By the time she realized what was happening, it was too late. But she was brave until the end, making sure Nathan and Ethan were safely hidden, making sure the evidence was preserved. Tears rolled down Eleanor's cheeks. She was so young, so full of life. The property is mine now, Harrison said firmly. Part of my inheritance as CEO of Ravenscroft Industries. We can access it, investigate properly this time. It won't be that simple, Dr. Chen warned. The people behind this, they're still out there, still powerful, and they're not above using force to protect their secrets. I don't care, Ethan declared. Mom gave her life trying to expose the truth. We owe it to her to finish what she started. Nathan reached for his son's hand. Ethan, it's too dangerous. I can't lose you too. We'll do it right this time, Harrison interjected. I have resources Father never dreamed of. Private security, environmental scientists, legal teams. We can document everything, build an airtight case. I'm going too, Sophia announced. Ethan's right, this is about family, all of us. Mr. Chen stood and walked to a cabinet, returning with a thick manila envelope. Rachel left this for you, Ethan. She said to give it to you when you were ready to know the truth. With trembling hands, Ethan opened the envelope. Inside was a letter, written in the same elegant handwriting he'd seen in the safety deposit box, and a small key. My dearest son, he read aloud, his voice catching. If you're reading this, you've discovered the truth about why we had to leave our old life behind. I hope you can forgive me for keeping so many secrets, for not being there to watch you grow up. Everything I did was to protect you, to give you a chance at a safe and happy life. But I also know my son. I know you have my sense of justice, your father's determination, so I left you this key. It opens a storage unit in Cascade Falls, where I kept the most damaging evidence, proof that even your grandfather didn't know about. Be careful, my darling boy. Be brave, and remember that whatever you discover, I am so proud of you. All my love, Mom. The room fell silent as Ethan folded the letter carefully and pocketed the key. Outside, the Seattle afternoon had turned gray, promising rain. But inside this room, surrounded by family both old and new, Ethan felt a fire of determination burning bright. When do we leave for Cascade Falls? He asked. Harrison checked his phone. I can have everything arranged by tomorrow morning. Dr. Chen, would you be willing to join us? Your expertise could be crucial. The elderly scientist nodded. I've waited 30 years to finish this investigation. I'm not missing it now. As they began making plans, Ethan felt Sophia squeeze his hand supportively. They were about to uncover the final pieces of Rachel's story, to expose secrets that had been buried for decades. It would be dangerous, but they would face it together as a family. Rachel's voice seemed to echo in his mind, carried in the words of her letter. Be careful, be brave, be proud. Tomorrow they would begin the final chapter of her unfinished story. The convoy of black SUVs wound its way through the misty forests surrounding Cascade Falls. Harrison's security team led the way, followed by vehicles carrying environmental scientists, legal observers, and the family members who had insisted on being present for this moment. Ethan sat between Sophia and his father in the middle SUV, the key from his mother's letter feeling heavy in his pocket. Dr. Chen sat in the front, directing them using her old research notes, while Harrison coordinated with the security team via radio. The storage facility should be just past the old town center, Dr. Chen said, consulting her map. Assuming it's still standing after all these years. The town of Cascade Falls was a ghost of its former self. Abandoned buildings lined the main street, their windows dark and empty. Nature was slowly reclaiming the structures, ivy crawling up walls and tree roots breaking through sidewalks. Most residents left after the illnesses started, Dr. Chen explained. Those who stayed were eventually bought out when the area was declared a nature preserve. They passed a faded sign marking the entrance to the preserve, its Ravenscroft Industries logo barely visible beneath years of weathering. The security team disabled an old electronic gate, and they continued down a deteriorating access road. Stop, Dr. Chen suddenly called out. There, that building with the green roof. That's where Rachel stored her evidence. The storage facility was small but solidly built, its metal doors showing little deterioration despite years of neglect. Harrison's security team did a perimeter check, while environmental scientists took air and soil samples. All clear, the head of security reported. But there are fresh tire tracks behind the building. Someone's been here recently. Harrison frowned. How recently? Within the last day or two. Should we abort? No, Ethan said firmly, pulling out his mother's key. We've come too far to turn back now. The key fit perfectly into the lock of unit number 23. The door rolled up with a protesting screech, revealing a space filled with file boxes and old computer equipment. Rachel was thorough, Dr. Chen observed, examining the nearest box. She copied everything: internal memos, shipping manifests, medical records. Over here, Sophia called from the back of the unit. She was holding up a plastic container filled with vials. Are these water samples? Dr. Chen confirmed, from various contamination sites. And look, she labeled them all with GPS coordinates. The scientists quickly moved in to secure the samples, while Harrison's legal team began photographing and cataloging the documents. Ethan wandered deeper into the unit, drawn to a small safe tucked in the corner. Mom's letter mentioned a second key, he remembered, checking the envelope again. Sure enough, a smaller key was taped inside. The safe opened with a soft click, revealing a single USB drive and a handwritten note. The final proof: be careful who sees this. Harrison pulled out a laptop, and they gathered around as he inserted the drive. The files were encrypted, but Dr. Chen quickly provided the password. Ethan James, 1989, Ethan's full name and birth year. The screen filled with video files, each labeled with a date and location. The first one showed a late-night meeting between Morrison Chemical executives and military officials. The second contained footage of unmarked trucks dumping waste into remote waterways. But it was the third video that made them all fall silent. It showed a younger version of Harrison and Nathan's father, Augustus Blackwood, in his office at Blackwood Industries. The military contracts are worth billions, Augustus was saying to someone off-screen. If this journalist publishes her story, it all falls apart. Handle it, whatever it takes. Dad, Nathan whispered, his face ashen. He really did. Wait, Harrison interrupted, pointing at the screen. Look at his expression. He's afraid of something. They watched more closely as Augustus continued. They said they'd destroy everything if I didn't cooperate. My family, my company, everything. I don't have a choice. He was being blackmailed, Sophia realized. by whoever was really behind the military contracts. Before they could watch more, a shout came from outside. Harrison's security team had spotted vehicles approaching, black SUVs with government plates. "We need to move," Harrison ordered. "Now, get everything into our vehicles." They worked quickly, loading boxes and equipment while security set up a defensive perimeter. Ethan copied the USB files onto multiple drives, ensuring the evidence couldn't be lost again. As they prepared to leave, he took one last look around the storage unit. Something caught his eye. A small package wedged behind the safe, labeled with his name. Inside was a framed photo of Rachel holding him as a baby. And another letter. "My darling boy, if you're reading this, you've found the truth I tried so hard to expose. But remember, the real treasure isn't in the evidence or the documents. It's in the love we share, the bonds that connect us, the courage to stand up for what's right. Whatever happens next, know that you come from a long line of people who chose truth over comfort, justice over safety. I love you always, Mom." The sound of approaching vehicles grew louder. "Ethan, we have to go," Sophia called urgently. He clutched the photo to his chest and ran for the SUV. As they pulled away, he saw men in dark suits emerging from the other vehicles, talking urgently into radios. "What now?" he asked Harrison. "Now we take this to people who can help," Harrison replied. "I have contacts in the media, in Congress. With this evidence, they can't hide the truth anymore." Nathan reached for his son's hand. "Your mother would be so proud of you, Ethan. You finished what she started." "We all did," Ethan corrected, looking around at his family, his father, his uncle, his cousin, Dr. Chen, all of them united in pursuing the truth Rachel had given her life to uncover. As they drove back towards Seattle, the photo of his mother seemed to radiate warmth in his hands. They had done it. They had uncovered the truth, exposed the lies, honored her memory. But more importantly, they had done it together, proving that family bonds could overcome any obstacle, heal any wound, reveal any truth. The real adventure, Ethan realized, was just beginning. They had a story to tell, justice to pursue, and a legacy to honor. But now they would face it as what they had truly become, a family united by love, truth, and the courage to stand up for what was right. 6 weeks after their discovery at Cascade Falls, the Ravenscroft Industries conference room was packed with journalists from major news outlets. Harrison stood at the podium, flanked by his legal team and environmental experts. On the front row, Ethan sat between his father and Sophia, with the Bennetts and Dr. Chen beside them. "For decades," Harrison began, his voice steady, "corporate interests have hidden the truth about what happened in Cascade Falls and other communities across the Pacific Northwest. Today, that changes. Today, we honor the memory of Rachel Blackwood, a brave journalist who gave her life to uncover this story." The presentation that followed was comprehensive and damning. Dr. Chen presented her research, now validated by modern environmental studies. Harrison's legal team detailed the complex web of shell companies and secret contracts that had hidden the truth for so long. But it was the personal story that captured everyone's attention. The young journalist who discovered the truth, the love story that defied family pressure, the son who finally uncovered his mother's legacy. As Harrison spoke about Rachel's courage and sacrifice, Ethan felt Sophia squeeze his hand supportively. After the press conference, as reporters filed out clutching their press packets, a distinguished older man approached their group. "Senator Thompson," Harrison greeted him, "thank you for coming." "This evidence is compelling," the senator said gravely. "The Oversight Committee will begin hearings next month. We'll need all of you to testify." Nathan straightened in his wheelchair. "We'll be there." Rachel's story needs to be told. Later that evening, the family gathered at the lake house. The mood was lighter than it had been in weeks, a sense of accomplishment mingling with relief and lingering sadness. "Mom would have loved this place," Ethan said, standing on the deck overlooking the sound. The sunset painted the water in shades of gold and purple, while behind them, the sounds of family conversation drifted through the open doors. "She did love it," Nathan joined him. His health notably improved since starting proper treatment. "We spent our last summer together here, before everything fell apart. She used to sit right here, watching the sunset, planning our future." Eleanor Bennett appeared with coffee for them both. "I found something today going through those old boxes from the storage unit. I think Rachel would want you to have it now." She handed Ethan a small, leather-bound book. Inside, he found entries written in his mother's familiar handwriting, a journal she'd kept during her pregnancy. "My dearest baby," he read aloud, "today I felt you kick for the first time. Your father was so excited. He spent an hour talking to my belly, telling you all about the adventures we'll have together. I don't know what the future holds, but I promise you this. You will always be loved, always be protected, and always know that standing up for the truth is worth any price." Ethan's voice cracked and Sophia quietly took over reading. "I dream about the day you'll understand why we made the choices we did, why we left everything behind. I hope you'll be proud of us, proud of the sacrifice we made to protect not just you, but all the families who deserve to know the truth." Harrison joined them on the deck, his tie loosened, looking more relaxed than he had in weeks. "The first settlement checks went out today," he announced, "to families affected by the contamination. It's not enough, it can never be enough, but it's a start." "And the military contracts?" Nathan asked. "Cancelled. All of them. Ravenscroft Industries is going in a new direction. Environmental cleanup, sustainable technology. We're going to try to fix some of what Father's generation broke." Mr. Chen appeared with a bottle of champagne and glasses. "A toast," he proposed, "to Rachel and to family." As they raised their glasses, Ethan looked around at the gathered faces, his father, stronger every day, his uncle, using his power to right old wrongs, his grandparents, finally at peace with their daughter's choices, Sophia, who had become the sister he never had, Dr. Chen and her brother, who had kept faith with Rachel's memory all these years. "You know," Sophia said thoughtfully, "Lakeside's newspaper needs a new editor for next year, someone who's not afraid to tackle tough stories." Ethan smiled, thinking of his mother's passion for journalism, for uncovering the truth. "Maybe it's time to carry on that legacy." "Speaking of legacies," Harrison added, "the board approved my proposal this morning. We're establishing the Rachel Blackwood Foundation for Investigative Journalism. Full scholarships for students who want to follow in her footsteps." Eleanor wiped tears from her eyes. She would have loved that. Using the family money to train a new generation of truth-tellers. The sunset had deepened to twilight, stars beginning to appear above the sound. From inside the house came the sounds of dinner being prepared, voices calling them in from the deck. It was the sound of family, of healing, of new beginnings built on hard-won truth. Nathan looked at his son proudly. "Your mother used to say that the truth always finds its way to the light. She was right about that, like she was right about so many things." "I wish I could have known her," Ethan said softly. "You do know her," Sophia replied. "Through her writing, through her work, through the people who loved her. And through yourself. You're so much like her, more than you realize." As they moved inside to join the others, Ethan clutched his mother's journal close. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, testimony to prepare, stories to write, truths still to be told. But tonight was for family, for remembrance, for celebrating the bonds that had survived secrets and separation and loss. Rachel's voice seemed to whisper in the evening breeze, "Always be loved, always be protected, always stand up for the truth." Looking at his gathered family, Ethan knew with certainty that her wishes for him had all come true. 1 year later, the Pike Place market was bustling with its usual morning energy. The former Blackwood fruit stand, now run by Mr. Chen's nephew, had expanded to include a small coffee counter where customers could enjoy their fresh purchases while overlooking Elliott Bay. Ethan stood at the counter, scanning the front page of the Seattle Times where the headline announced, "Morrison Chemical Cleanup Enters Final Phase. Ravenscroft Industries Leads Environmental Restoration." The article featured quotes from Harrison about corporate responsibility and included a sidebar about the Rachel Blackwood Foundation's first class of scholarship recipients. "Your usual?" Mr. Chen's nephew asked, already preparing Ethan's favorite apple cinnamon tea. "Thanks, Michael," Ethan smiled, tucking the newspaper into his backpack, alongside the latest edition of the Lakeside newspaper, where his editorial about environmental justice had just won a statewide student journalism award. Sophia appeared, camera in hand. "Ready for the ceremony?" Today marked the official opening of the Rachel Blackwood Center for Investigative Journalism at Portland State University. The building, funded by the foundation, would house state-of-the-art facilities for student journalists, and provide resources for investigating environmental and corporate accountability stories. "Just waiting for Dad," Ethan replied. His physical therapy ran late. Nathan had made remarkable progress over the past year. With proper treatment and the weight of secrets finally lifted from his shoulders, he had regained much of his strength. He still used a cane, but he could walk short distances now, determined to stand beside his son at today's ceremony. "There he is," Sophia pointed. Nathan was making his way through the market, accompanied by Eleanor and Robert Bennett. The grandparents had relocated to Seattle 6 months ago, unable to bear being separated from their newfound family any longer. "The contractor finished the accessibility ramps at the lake house," Nathan announced as they joined them. "We can start moving in next week." The decision to make the lake house their permanent home had come naturally. It was where Rachel had been happiest, where the family had begun to heal, and now it would be where they built their future together. Harrison was waiting for them outside in the familiar Tesla. "Senator Thompson just confirmed," he reported as they settled in. "The new Environmental Protection Bill passed committee. They're calling it the Rachel Blackwood Act." The drive to Portland was filled with comfortable conversation and shared memories. So much had changed in a year. Harrison had transformed Ravenscroft Industries into a leader in environmental technology. The truth about Morrison Chemical had sparked investigations into similar cases across the country. Families affected by the contamination were receiving compensation and medical care. But the biggest changes were more personal. The wounds of the past had begun to heal, replaced by new bonds and shared purpose. Ethan and Sophia had grown as close as any siblings, while Nathan and Harrison had rediscovered the easy companionship of their youth. The Bennetts had brought new warmth and history to their expanding family circle. The ceremony at Portland State University drew a large crowd. Dr. Chen gave the opening speech, her voice strong as she recounted Rachel's courage and vision. Harrison spoke about corporate responsibility and the importance of investigative journalism. Nathan shared personal memories of Rachel's passion for truth and justice. Finally, it was Ethan's turn to speak. Standing at the podium, looking out at the gathered faces, family, friends, journalists, students eager to follow in his mother's footsteps, he felt a deep sense of rightness. "My mother believed that the truth was worth any sacrifice," he began. "She believed that one person with courage could make a difference. But what I've learned this past year is that the greatest truths aren't uncovered alone. They're revealed through family, through friendship, through generations of people choosing to stand up for what's right." He gestured to the modern building behind him, its glass walls reflecting the Portland sunshine. "This center will carry forward my mother's legacy. But that legacy isn't just about exposing corporate wrongdoing or environmental crimes. It's about the courage to face difficult truths, the strength to stand up against powerful interests, and most importantly, the understanding that real change happens when people come together, support each other, and refuse to be silenced." After the ceremony, the family gathered in Rachel's favorite Portland park. Eleanor spread a picnic blanket, while Robert distributed sandwiches. Harrison and Nathan sat comparing old photographs with new ones, tracking the family resemblances that appeared in the next generation. Sophia was showing Ethan her photos from the ceremony when Mr. Chen arrived with his sister. Dr. Chen carried a small package wrapped in familiar brown paper. "We found this in Rachel's old research files," she explained, handing it to Ethan. "She left instructions for it to be given to you on this day." Inside was a camera, Rachel's old film camera that she'd used during her investigation. Attached was a note, "For my son, who I know will continue to seek truth and justice in his own way. Every story needs a witness. Every truth needs someone brave enough to share it. I'm so proud of the person you've become." Ethan raised the camera, focusing on his gathered family. Through the viewfinder, he saw not just the present moment, but the threads of past and future woven together. His mother's courage, his father's strength, his uncle's redemption, his cousin's loyalty, his grandparents' love, all of it captured in one perfect frame. "Hey," Sophia called out, "group photo." They assembled on the grass, arms around each other, faces bright with joy and shared purpose. As the camera's timer ticked down, Ethan felt the warm Portland breeze ruffle his hair. Somewhere he was sure his mother was smiling. The photo would later take pride of place at the lake house, alongside Rachel's old pictures and the growing collection of family memories. It showed not just a group of people, but a family that had chosen truth over secrets, love over fear, unity over division. They had uncovered the truth Rachel died protecting. They had brought justice to those she sought to help. But most importantly, they had built something she had always dreamed of, a family bound together by love, courage, and the unwavering belief that standing up for what's right is always worth the cost. The truth had found its way to the light, just as Rachel had believed it would. And in that light, her legacy would continue to grow, touching lives and inspiring change for generations to come.